Now, the official security guarantees for Ukraine are ready to be signed. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this after an emergency trip to Davos. The meeting between the leaders of Kyiv and Washington has radically changed the situation. It is known that the long-awaited document must also be ratified by the US Congress and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. At the same time, Ukraine's post-war breakthrough plan is still on hold. The documents are still being finalized, but the course remains clear and optimistic. Zelensky emphasizes that the key issue here is money. The country must clearly understand what resources will be used for post-war recovery and what it can realistically count on, not only the current government, but also future administrations. At the same time, Kyiv and Washington are discussing another strategic step, a free trade zone. Trump supported the idea, and for Ukrainian business, this could be a major breakthrough. The details are still to come, but the message is clear. The US is ready to open new economic doors for Ukraine. A sensation, Macron gave a sharp order. France has begun a hunt for Russia's shadow fleet, and news quickly broke that Paris had detained the first tanker. The interception took place in the Mediterranean Sea with the support of several allies. The oil tanker, which is under international sanctions, was coming from Russia. Shocking details of the special operation were revealed by the head of state, Emmanuel Macron. It contributes to the financing of the aggressive war against Ukraine. That is why this must be decisively put to end. At the moment, a judicial investigation has been launched. We are monitoring the developments. The Middle East is entering a phase of sharp and irreversible changes. Russia, get ready. In northern Syria, near the Turkish border, the situation is escalating, around the Al-Qamishli Oasis. Previously, it was held together by fragile agreements and Russian mediation. But now, the new Damascus is setting the rules. Its troops are already entering the region and making it clear where things stand. There is no longer a place for Moscow in this arrangement. Sources within the Syrian authorities openly state that the Russians are being prepared for a complete withdrawal. The old agreements have lost their force, and Russia's very presence is increasingly seen as a burden rather than a security guarantee. Notably, at the same time, the US will also be winding down its presence, leaving the region without external guardians. This will create a vacuum that Syria intends to fill on its own, without tricolors or foreign flags. For the Kremlin, this is not just a military maneuver, but a serious geopolitical slap in the face. The myth of Russia's key role in Syria is visibly falling apart. This is what the world is talking about today. Don't miss what's next. China has come down hard on Moscow. Bloody chaos in Russia. Something terrible has happened there. London is rushed into the fight. This will finally bury the Kremlin. The Shahed drone attacks have come to an end. Putin's drones will no longer reach Ukrainian cities. Russia is disarmed. Urgently, Chinese banks have cut off Russia's access. The aggressor's economy is in its death throes. Bloomberg reports a total halt in payments. Due to US sanctions, Chinese bankers have blocked Russian accounts. Even the untouchable Gazprom bank has come under fire. While Putin wages war, his treasury is emptying at a cosmic speed, and Beijing is simply watching the collapse.
Kyrgyz Karamet Bank fell under blocking sanctions, as according to American data, it was conducting foreign currency payments for a key bank in the Russian defense sector. The tightening of Western sanctions led to a decline in Russian exports at the end of 2024. In December, exports dropped by 19% year-on-year, down to $31.3 billion. And the trade balance surplus shrank to $5.6 billion. The lowest level since 2020.
But that was only the beginning. Comrade Xi is throwing the Kremlin overboard for good. The Kremlin is finally being cast adrift. Beijing has officially bet on the Middle Corridor, a route in which there is simply no place for Russia. It used to be considered a backup, but everything's changed. Now, Chinese goods will bypass the Russian Federation, going through Kazakhstan, the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and Georgia directly to Europe. Why did China make such a sharp turn? The reason is Putin's war against Ukraine. The northern route through Russia is paralyzed by sanctions, banking problems, and risks. The bunker grandpa has turned his country into a black hole on the logistics map. And now the final blow. Russia got used to stealing from others, but now China is taking back what's its own. Not long ago, Beijing officially redrew the maps and expanded its territory at the expense of regions under Russian control. For example, Bolshoi Ussuriysky Island. In 2008, the leaders agreed to split it in half. But on the new map, the entire area is marked as Chinese territory. And Russian propagandists just swallowed it. They timidly wrote, well, it was a disputed territory. Now it's Chinese. Deal with it. The appetite of the Chinese dragon is much more frightening. According to the Chinese president, Russia illegally possesses 1 million square kilometers. These are lands that once belonged to the Qing dynasty. Among them are Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, Blagoveshchensk, Sakhalin Island, and about a dozen other regions. Putin is losing his main ally. The myth of eternal friendship between Moscow and Beijing has crumbled to dust. The influential publication The Times reports that China feels humiliated and betrayed. The reason is the abduction of the Venezuelan dictator Maduro. Beijing was caught off guard because its loyal ally, Russia, would not have been able to prevent it. The facts are simply devastating for the Kremlin's reputation. First of all, the much vaunted Russian no analogs proved to be a myth. The S-300 and Book M2 systems turned out to be complete junk. They just stood there like props while the Americans carried out the operation. In China, they suspect the worst. This isn't just a malfunction, it's a betrayal. The Russians may have deliberately disabled the air defense systems as part of secret agreements with the US.
The U.S. operation demonstrated Beijing's limited capabilities, despite its loud diplomatic statements. And in Chinese culture, losing face carries special significance.
Moscow really did deliberately betray China and Venezuela. Realizing that Maduro's regime was doomed, the Russians began evacuating their diplomats and families in advance. Did they warn Beijing? Of course not. Putin knew and kept silent. The PRC, which had invested $9 billion in Venezuelan oil and factories, was left with nothing. Xi Jinping realized he had simply been played.
The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs began evacuating diplomats' families from Venezuela. An official representative told the Associated Press that the evacuation includes women and children and began on Friday, adding that representatives of the Russian Foreign Ministry are assessing the situation in Venezuela. It's very grave.
Now in Beijing, they're asking themselves, why do we need such a partner? An alliance with Russia is becoming toxic, asymmetric, and inconvenient. A militarized, deceitful Russia that disregards its partners is no longer part of China's plans. And here is the first warning sign. China demonstratively signed an agreement with Canada to reduce tariffs. This is a signal to the Kremlin. We will find normal, civilized partners who follow the rules, not those who settle scores by their own code. Russia, with its war, threats, and betrayal, can get lost. So while Putin is busy looking for enemies in the West, he has managed to make an enemy out of his only patron in the East. And that's not all. The leader of China has established relations with Russia's main enemy, America. Xi Jinping called Trump a friend and made concessions to save his own economy. The trade war between Beijing and Washington is officially over. The conclusion is simple. China needs the US market, and Putin's problems don't concern it.
Restoring parity in U.S.-China relations, protecting national security and technological sovereignty, as well as ensuring a more stable environment for long-term economic development. Therefore, China's recent actions should be seen not as an emotional act of revenge, but as a calculated and disciplined strategic counteroffensive.
There is even worse news for Russia. Trump confirmed that he did not discuss this with the Chinese leader at all. Moreover, after sanctions were imposed on Rosneft and Lukoil, Chinese corporate giants temporarily halted purchases of Russian oil. I see. Yes, Beijing has stockpiled reserves. Yes, gray schemes are still operating, but the signal is clear and powerful for the Kremlin. No one is going to stick their neck out. As soon as there was a whiff of losing money, the Chinese brothers immediately took a step back. And this benefits everyone except
the Federation itself. This will put pressure on Moscow's oil revenues and force the world's largest importers to look for alternative sources of supply, which will lead to higher global prices.
The outcome is obvious. China has finally dumped Russia for scrap. The fairy tale of brothers forever ended in a grand betrayal. A familiar story, isn't it? So now Moscow has officially lost its last support.
An emergency evacuation has been announced in Belgrade. A terrible incident has occurred there. A Russian aerial bomb was dropped on the city. The city's mayor, Valentin Demidov, reported that Defense Ministry sappers are currently inspecting the area. The danger zone has been cordoned off and traffic has been blocked. Residents from nearby buildings are being evacuated. The authorities are cowardly silent about the origin of the munition, but the city already knows the truth. It was a stray Putin aerial bomb. Local social media groups are exploding with anger and footage of the deadly gift to the residential area. The regional governor, Gladkov, stated that work to remove the munition is ongoing in Belgrade.
Emercom specialists and Defense Ministry bomb disposal experts are on site, with heavy machinery involved. An emergency operations center has been set up by the city administration. At this point, more than 1,700 people have been relocated. About 50 residents are currently in the temporary accommodation center.
Urgent. There have never been such fierce strikes against the enemy before. Drones attacked a seaport in Krasnodar Krai. Media reports say that a devastating strike occurred while petroleum products were being loaded onto one of the tankers.
Oh, at least it hit something.
Russian social media channels haven't been silent for a minute. Terrible news is spreading. The terminals instantly burst into flames like matches. 200 rescuers and 51 pieces of equipment are fighting the fire. The local authorities can no longer hide it.
The moment, the fire at the terminals is still ongoing. 4 tanks with petroleum products have caught fire.
The Krasnodar Krai emergency headquarters, it was acknowledged that as a result of the drone attack, 3 people were killed and 8 more were injured. Putin's chaos is in full swing. Trouble never comes along. A bloody collapse in Novosibirsk. A shopping center collapsed right onto people's heads. The second floor folded like a house of cards. According to Russian media reports, at least 2 people were injured. Rescuers are clearing the rubble. The Ministry of Emergency Situations is sounding the alarm. There are still people trapped under the ruins. It is reported that the building's roof collapsed under the weight of heavy snow. Judging by the photos, the second floor of the shopping center completely caved in.
The causes of the incident are being determined. An inspection has been ordered to check compliance with requirements for roof maintenance and timely clearing of snow from the roofs.
Russia is crumbling. It's the city's second disaster this week. Previously, a snow apocalypse hit the Albatross ski resort. While the Kremlin wages war, Russian cities are being buried under rubble and snow. In Kamchatka, record snowfall unseen in 50 years has people jumping from windows of flats into snowdrifts. Local residents have reported snowbanks up to 5 meters high on social media. A municipal-level state of emergency remains in effect in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Avalanche warnings are in effect throughout the region.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
A state of emergency has been declared in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky due to the snow crisis. 2 local residents died after being buried by snow that fell from rooftops. Against this backdrop, passenger buses have stopped running in Kamchatka. People are being transported by National Guard vans and shift buses. Some residents' homes have been buried in snow, so much so that they can't get out without the help of rescuers. And now Moscow is being hit by severe frosts. After record-breaking snowdrifts, a new devastating cyclone is about to hit the capital. Moscow still hasn't recovered from a snowfall not seen in the last 56 years, and meteorologists are already sounding the alarm. An abnormal icy blast will hit the region, paralyzing the city.
This is what an unplowed road looks like. On top of that, more snow has been dumped here. It's impossible to get to work. Simply impossible.
A new cyclone is creeping up on Moscow. According to forecasts, the temperature in Moscow could drop to minus 20 degrees, and in some areas to minus 22 or even lower. It's panic time. The entire heating system is being urgently switched to survival mode.
One got stuck and is just standing there. The rest, accordingly, can't turn.
Russian drones are no longer a threat test. Ukraine is putting a definitive end to the Shahed issue. No more fear of destruction and blackouts because of drones. Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov made a sensational statement. We are building an anti-drone dome that will solve the problem of enemy attacks completely and once and for all.
The world was not prepared for a war of this kind, but we are forced to respond, quickly, systematically, and with technology. That is why, on the President's orders, we are changing our approach to protecting the skies. Transforming such a system does not happen in a matter of days. But we need to start today in order to ultimately resolve this issue.
We must take decisive action to resolve this entire situation permanently, ensuring that it is settled once and for all without any possibility of it recurring. But not a single one of them will reach its target anymore. Fedorov stated categorically, we are closing this issue.
We must now take every necessary step to resolve this entire situation completely and permanently, ensuring that it is finished once and for all and will never require our attention or intervention again in the future. Dozens of critical infrastructure sites have been damaged by Shaheds and other types of UAVs. There have been hundreds of strikes on residential buildings, and there are casualties. The number of attacks is increasing. The enemy wants to destroy civilian infrastructure and plunge Ukraine into darkness.
To make this shield absolutely impenetrable, the best of the best, Pavel Lazar Yelizarov has been appointed Deputy Commander of the Air Force. He's a commander who has proven that for him, there are no impossible targets. His unit has destroyed Russian equipment worth an astronomical $13 billion. For this, Lazar even made the cover of Forbes magazine in November 2025. Now this legendary figure will personally take part in the process of creating clear skies over Ukraine.
Our task is to build an anti-drone dome over Ukraine. To do this, we need people who have already proven their effectiveness in modern warfare. Lazar is exactly that kind of person. Under his leadership, the Lassers Group unit became one of the most effective in the defense forces. Every fifth destroyed Russian tank is the result of their work. Now, the task is to scale up this experience, to build a system that works not just in isolated cases, but across the entire country.
Elizara first encountered UAVs near Zaporizhia. It was there that he saw the drone war with his own eyes and realized that the future belongs to technology. He didn't wait, he acted immediately. He created heavy drone bombers and assembled his legendary special unit Lazar in the National Guard. Now, this unit is a nightmare for the enemy at night. Ukraine has found the perfect solution. We are changing the very logic of defense. The Kremlin is now completely disarmed. Their main bet on aerial terror has been destroyed. The anti-drone dome is a huge step towards increasing safety and peace of mind. There is no doubt. The system is already being built, and it will powerfully protect Ukraine's military airspace. While air defense is protecting the Ukrainian sky, the armed forces of Ukraine are preparing a powerful strike against the occupiers. Syrsky has announced a large-scale counteroffensive. The Kremlin dreams of a protracted conflict, but the Ukrainian army is already planning operations that will be a fatal surprise for the enemy. What exactly has the commander-in-chief planned, and where should the Russians expect a devastating strike? The main message from Alexander Syrsky is coming up in the report.
While the civilized world hopes for negotiations, the armed forces of Ukraine harbor no illusions and are preparing for a new phase of the war. Ukraine intends not only to hold the line of defense, but also to regain the initiative on the battlefield.
We see the enemy's days, and we do not see a victim, but a sign. We observe the enemy's actions, and we see no signs that they are preparing, neither towards any peace negotiations or initiatives, nor towards actions on the battlefield. On the contrary, we see the opposite. An increase in the intensity of hostilities and a buildup of the enemy's offensive groupings, as well as a rise in expansion in the production volumes of strike weapons, missiles.
And drones. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, stated in an interview with LBUA that it is impossible to win this war by defense alone. This war cannot be won by defense alone. That is why the General Staff is already laying out the strategy for a new offensive operation. According to Syrsky, Russia's strategic goal remains unchanged: the occupation of all of Ukraine. Only the timelines, available resources, and the amount of weaponry at the Kremlin's disposal at each stage of the war change. And under these circumstances, passive defense only plays into the hands of the enemy.
We will conduct offensive operations, fight to maintain operational initiative, because this forces the enemy to commit and withdraw significant human resources, weapons, and ammunition to contain our active actions.
The logic of the General Staff is simple. Offensive actions don't necessarily mean large-scale operations, but they deprive the enemy of freedom of maneuver, force them to redeploy reserves, and weaken them in other sectors of the front. This is exactly how Ukraine plans to wear down the Russian army, by imposing its own tempo of war.
Ukraine's ultimate triumph and success means that Ukraine has successfully obstructed and completely derailed the strategic and aggressive plans formulated by Moscow, specifically those Russian plans that envisioned the total and systematic destruction of Ukrainian statehood and the occupation of its entire territory. So Russia's fundamental inability and failure to achieve such a decisive victory, which was in fact explicitly declared and publicly stated by Vladimir Putin himself, and is supported by a very substantial and large portion of Russian society, that, in my personal view, is precisely what the ultimate definition of a victory for Ukraine truly means and represents.
In 2026, Orifayem's approach does not change. Russia still relies not on efficiency, but on sheer numbers. According to Syrsky, the mobilization potential of the aggressor country exceeds 20 million people, of whom 4.5 million are already a trained reserve. This year, Moscow plans to conscript more than 409,000 people, simultaneously forming new divisions and replenishing losses, which have already exceeded 850,000 over the past 2 years of war.
No fewer than 11 divisions are planned for this year. And, of course, the continuation of carrying out plans and tasks that were not completed last year.
However, even with this approach, the aggressor faces serious limitations. According to the Ukrainian command, despite the large-scale mobilization, the number of enemy assault groups at the front remains almost unchanged. This is all due to the colossal losses, which deplete resources faster than they can be replenished. It is precisely this that derailed Moscow's plans to form fully fledged reserve armies, and forced them to throw fresh meat into patching up already existing sections of the front.
Part of this strategic reserve. Do you remember that he planned to form 14 divisions? He formed no more than half, and even then only partially, and those resources went to make up for losses.
But the Kremlin's main bet is not just on numbers. Russia is rapidly ramping up the production of strike drones and plans to reach the use of up to 1,000 drones per day. This means a change in the very logic of the war, even deeper strikes, constant pressure on the rear, and new challenges for Ukrainian air defense and the front as a whole. At the same time, Syrsky emphasizes that 2025 has not become a year of defeats for Ukraine. Russia has not managed to achieve any of its strategic objectives. Neither a breakthrough deep into Ukraine, nor the encirclement of key cities, nor a breach of the defenses. In none of their plans has the enemy
been able to succeed. Do you remember how many such routine claims there were? The enemy was unable to carry out any of their plans. Do you remember how many loud statements there were about them finishing this special operation before the summer even? Or, for example, before the new year? There were a lot of such statements. I remember just in certain directions there were 6 or 7. Offensives were planned. They had very ambitious plans to capture our country, but none of these plans...
The long-awaited plans finally came to a complete and successful fruition. But an even more difficult stage lies ahead. The war is increasingly turning into a competition of economies and technologies, where drones, artificial intelligence, hypersonic strikes, and a state's ability to scale up weapons production faster than the enemy play a decisive role. That is why, as the commander-in-chief emphasizes, the weak do not get to negotiate. The conditions for peace are created only by strength.
The creation of missile weapons in sufficient quantity, including, supposedly, ballistic missiles. This means producing enough missile weaponry. This applies to both ballistic and cruise missiles. And the use of the latest types of weapons, such as laser weapons, and moving to a new level of equipping the armed forces will allow us to reduce the direct involvement of people in combat operations and increase the participation of machines. First and foremost, this means drone systems, and of course the further development of artificial intelligence.
This refers to drone systems, and of course the continued development of artificial intelligence. Essentially, Ukraine is betting on the war of the future, where the decisive factor is not the size of the army, but technology, the economy, and the ability to adapt more quickly. According to Zelenskyy, this is precisely where Ukraine has real grounds to hope for a turning point in the war.